What if I told you that the richest footballer in history isn't Messi, Ronaldo, or even Mbappé? In fact, he was never even a superstar. He wasn't a Ballon d'Or winner, he wasn't a club icon, and most of the time, he wasn't even a starter. And yet today, he is worth more than every single one of them, combined. His name? You probably don't even remember him. But by the end of this video, you'll never forget him. Because while the world was focused on flashy goals and million-dollar contracts, this player was making quiet, calculated moves behind the scenes, moves that would eventually make him richer than Michael Jordan. So, who is he? And how did he manage to out-earn the biggest football stars on the planet? Let's start from the beginning. If you walked into a packed stadium during Mathieu Flamini's prime and asked fans to name their favourite player, his name wouldn't even come up. Why? Because Flamini was never that guy. He wasn't the magician pulling off jaw-dropping skills like Ronaldinho. He wasn't a clinical finisher like Henry. He wasn't even the type of player fans would rush to buy a jersey for. But what Flamini did have was pure grit, adaptability, and an insane work ethic. Flamini's journey started in Marseille's youth academy. Unlike most footballers who burst onto the scene as teenage superstars, his rise was quiet. No massive hype, no media frenzy, no viral YouTube compilations. Yet within the club, coaches saw something special, not in his skill, but in his determination. They kept him in the system for over a decade before finally giving him a shot with the first team. His moment arrived in 2003 when he was called up to play for Marseille's senior squad. But here's the problem, he wasn't a priority. During his only season with the first team, he played just 14 matches. For any young player trying to break into professional football, this is the worst situation. If you don't stand out, you fade away. If you don't get minutes, you get forgotten. And just when it seemed like his career might stall before it even started, Arsenal came knocking. Now, Arsenal in 2004 was no joke. This was the golden era, the era of Thierry Henry, Patrick Vieira, and the Invincibles. So why would Arsène Wenger, one of the greatest football minds in history, look at a kid who played 14 matches for Marseille and think, yeah, we need him? It wasn't because Flamini was flashy. It wasn't because he was a future superstar. It was because Wenger saw something more valuable than raw talent. He saw a fighter. Flamini signed for Arsenal at just 20 years old, but this wasn't some dream move where he instantly became a Premier League sensation. Nope, he had to fight for every single minute on the pitch. He wasn't fast, he wasn't technical, he wasn't a natural playmaker, but what Flamini did better than anyone else. He worked hard. In his first season, he played 32 matches. Not because he was a star, but because he was willing to play anywhere, anytime, no matter what. Central midfield? Done. Defensive midfielder? No complaints. Left back? A position he'd never played before? He just did it. And for Arsenal fans, that was enough. Flamini became known as the guy who never took his foot off the gas. No fancy tricks, no unnecessary flair, just pure hustle. But there was one big problem. No matter how hard he worked, he was never Arsenal's first choice. He was never going to replace Patrick Vieira. And every time Arsenal signed a new big-name midfielder, Flamini's chances got even slimmer. Yet somehow, against all odds, he managed to make over 150 appearances for Arsenal. Not because he was the most skilled, not because he was a fan favourite, but because he made himself indispensable. Just when it looked like he was finally carving out a long-term place in the squad, disaster struck. By the 2007-08 season, Flamini had finally broken into Arsenal's starting lineup. For the first time in his career, he wasn't just a backup. He was a starter, a leader, a midfield enforcer. But in football, things can change in an instant. A brutal knee injury took him out, and with Arsenal constantly looking for upgrades, they didn't wait for him to recover. At the end of the season, his contract expired. And just like that, after 4 years of fighting for a spot, he was out. For most players, this would be the end. But Flamini, he was just getting started. Because while Arsenal fans thought he was just moving on to AC Milan, Flamini was quietly planning his next big move, one that had nothing to do with football. During his first stint at AC Milan, Flamini met a scientist who introduced him to something that, at the time, seemed completely irrelevant to football: levulinic acid. If you've never heard of it, don't worry, neither had Flamini. But once he realised what it could do, he saw an opportunity no one else did. Levulinic acid is a powerful, sustainable biofuel. It can replace oil in making plastics, cosmetics, and even pharmaceuticals. If someone could figure out how to mass produce it, they wouldn't just be rich, they would change the entire energy industry. And Flamini, he wanted to be that person. Most footballers spend their millions on luxury cars, watches, and mansions. Flamini, he poured millions into scientific research. And here's the crazy part, he didn't even tell his teammates. For 7 years, Flamini quietly built GF Biochemicals with his business partner. They invested in labs, hired scientists, and funded research, all while he was still playing football. His teammates had no idea. His coaches had no idea. Even his family didn't fully know what he was up to. Then, in 2015, after years of development, GF Biochemicals achieved something no company in the world had ever done. They became the first company to mass produce levulinic acid. And suddenly, Flamini wasn't just a footballer anymore. He was the co-founder of a billion-dollar company. By 2015, GF Biochemicals had achieved the impossible. The company's valuation skyrocketed to £21 billion. And with Flamini owning 60% of it, his net worth soared past £10 billion. To put that in perspective, Cristiano Ronaldo, £500 million Lionel Messi, £600 million Neymar, £200 million Michael Jordan, £2.6 billion Flamini, £10 billion. A footballer who never won a Ballon d'Or, a player who was never the best on his team, a guy who played most of his career as a substitute, had now surpassed every major sports legend in personal wealth. What can we take from Flamini's story? Firstly, that success isn't just about talent. It's about vision, adaptability, and long-term thinking. Flamini saw an opportunity nobody else did, took a risk, and changed his life. His story proves that true success isn't reserved for the most naturally gifted. It belongs to those who are willing to think differently, take risks, and play the long game. He reminds us that while others focus on short-term wins, the real victories come from patience, persistence, and preparation. So, the next time you doubt yourself thinking you're not the best or most talented in your field, remember Flamini. He wasn't the star player, but he became a star in his own way. Because if a bench warmer can become a billionaire, what's stopping you?